Welcome to a deep dive, you guys. We're really digging into a passage from Proverbs today. It's Proverbs 2.16:19. And on the surface, it's about this immoral woman, but I think we're going to find there's way more to it than that.
Oh, yeah,
It's
absolutely.
like this ancient wisdom stuff, but it still speaks to us today, you know?
It really does. It's about temptation, consequences. Like, are you going to stay true to what you believe in? That's timeless stuff.
Exactly. So should we just jump right into this?
Let's do it.
Okay, so here's Proverbs 2.16:19, straight from the source material. Wisdom will save you from the immoral woman, from the seductive words of the promiscuous woman. She has abandoned her husband and ignores the covenant she made before God. Entering her house leads to death. It is the road to the grave. The man who visits her is doomed. He will never reach the paths of life.
Oh, yeah.
Talk about intense imagery.
Yeah, no kidding.
House leading to death, road to the grave. It's like, this isn't just about cheating on your spouse. This is serious business.
Right. You got to remember, back then, adultery, that wasn't just like a personal thing. It was a huge deal. Socially, religiously, like you were breaking a covenant.
Yeah, a sacred bond.
And not just with your spouse, but with God.
So it's like this immoral woman, she represents something bigger.
Oh, absolutely. And it gets even more interesting when you look at the original Hebrew. The word they use here, Aisha, Zara, it can mean strange woman or foreign woman.
Hmm. So it's not just about one specific woman, it's
It's anything that tempts you, anything that pulls you off the right path.
like any temptation at all.
Exactly. It could be that donut when you're trying to eat healthy, you know? It's anything that lures you away from what you know is good for you.
So we're talking about more than just infidelity here. This passage is about any choice we make that could lead us down a dangerous path. And speaking of paths, it mentions these seductive words that are smooth or slippery. That paint a pretty vivid picture, doesn't it?
It does. That's the allure of folly, you know? It always seems so easy, so pleasurable at first glance.
Right, like in that story from our source material, the one about Mark, the CEO. He's got it all, but then he sees this opportunity, and it seems even better, but it's also kind of a shortcut.
Right. And at first, it's all smooth sailing, profits are up, everyone's happy, he's thinking he's so smart. But then, boom, the truth comes out. His reputation is ruined, his business is decimated, everything he built, gone. Because he took the easy road, the tempting shortcut that actually led to destruction.
And that's the thing, isn't it? Proverbs figured this out, what, like 3,000 years ago? That there's no such thing as a free lunch. And those get-rich-quick schemes, they usually leave you worse off than before.
Exactly. And it's why these sayings have lasted so long. They speak to something true about us humans, you know?
Yeah.
We're always tempted by the easy path, but it's usually not the best one.
So if we're looking at this immoral woman as a symbol of temptation, like we're talking about,
Mm-hmm.
how do we resist her pull?
Yeah.
What's the key to not falling for those seductive words?
That's the million-dollar question, right? And I think Proverbs is pretty clear about the answer. It's wisdom.
Wisdom. So not just trying to be a good person or whatever, but really like aligning yourself with something bigger.
Yeah, something truer. It's about making those choices that lead to the paths of life, even when they're not easy.
Right? Even when they're not the easy way. And I think what gets me about this passage is it doesn't sugarcoat the consequences, like entering her house leads to death. That's pretty hardcore.
Yeah, no kidding. And you know, we have to think about death a little differently in this context. It wasn't just physical death they were talking about back then. It was about being separated from God, a kind of spiritual death. Like you lose your purpose, your meaning.
It's like that image from our source material, the labyrinth. If you get lost in there, you're in trouble. You might never find your way out.
Exactly. And that's why Proverbs stresses the importance of wisdom. It's your guide, your map through that maze. It helps you navigate all those twists and turns so you don't end up at a dead end. It's so true. We all need those guides in our lives, don't we? Because let's be real, those seductive words, they're pretty convincing sometimes. Even Mark, the CEO, he probably thought he was being smart, that he could handle it.
Right. And that's the sneaky thing about folly. It often wears a mask. It pretends to be opportunity, freedom, even intelligence. But Proverbs is reminding us that real wisdom, it's not about trying to outsmart the consequences. It's about aligning your life with what's right, even when it's hard.
And, you know, our source material had this other interesting point. They were talking about how that house in the passage, it's not just a literal house, it's a metaphor for your whole way of life. Totally. It's about the choices you make every day, the habits you form, the values you live by. When it talks about that house leading to death, it's describing that downward spiral that happens when you keep making choices that pull you further and further away from wisdom.
Like you're building your own house, brick by brick, with every decision.
Yeah, and the foundation matters. The choices you make, they form the foundation of your life.
So then, how do we get better at choosing the right bricks? How do we learn to spot those tempting, seductive words for what they really are? How do we build a life that's like aligned with wisdom, with those paths of life that Proverbs is always talking about?
I think a big part of it is recognizing that we're not meant to figure it all out on our own.
We're not in this alone. I like that. That's a good reminder, because it's almost like this whole immoral woman thing. It's like she's trying to convince you to go it alone, you know? Like, it'll be our little secret. Don't worry about what anyone else thinks.
It's funny you should say that because, yeah, Proverbs really connects wisdom with community. Like, it's not enough to just try to be wise by yourself. You need other people.
So it's like those guardrails we were talking about, but not just metaphorical ones. You got to have actual people in your life to help you stay on track. People who can give you advice, support you, even call you out when you need it.
Exactly. And that's where this whole idea of covenant comes back around, because it's not just this old-fashioned religious thing. It's about the power of commitment, like binding yourself to something bigger than yourself, whether it's your spouse, your family, your friends, your values, ultimately even God, if that's part of your life.
And I think that's why this passage still matters, even though it's, like thousands of years old. It's not just about one woman or even just about making good choices. It's about living a life with integrity, keeping your promises, building your life on something real, not just chasing after whatever feels good in the moment.
Yeah, it's about the long game. And remember, those paths of life we keep coming back to, it's not like you suddenly reach this perfect state of wisdom. It's a journey. You're going to make mistakes along the way. We all do. But wisdom, that's what helps you get back up, learn from it, and keep going.
It's like having that compass, always pointing you the right direction, even when you feel lost.
And one of the wisest things you can do is know when to ask for directions.
Right. To admit you don't have it all figured out.
Exactly. It takes courage to be humble, to ask for help when you need it, and to let yourself be guided by something bigger than yourself.
So I guess the question we can all be thinking about this week is, what are those covenants in your own life? What really matters to you? And how can you start aligning your choices, your habits, even just your attitude, to those deeper commitments? Because ultimately, I think that's what this whole wisdom thing is all about. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, everybody. We'll see you next time. Keep seeking that wisdom.